everyone, and welcome back to my sewing room. If you're new, my name's Diane and I like to share with you the stories of the quilts that I make. And this week I would like to share with you this quilt behind me. I've called it the Green Wonder. The eagle-eyed amongst you will see that it's only a flimsy. I haven't completed it yet because there's been a delay with the delivery for the backing. It's on its way, but it doesn't know when it's going to arrive. I think it's gone on walkabout, but when it gets here, I shall put it together and I'll show you it when it's finished. But I've called this quilt the Green Wonder because for a long time, I was wondering how I would turn all the blocks that I was making into a quilt. So it started, I suppose, at the beginning of the year. I decided that I would stop just putting these little blocks. I've been saving small squares, really tiny squares, in pots. And I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore because, to be honest, when you've got huge amounts of these small pieces here, it's a little bit overwhelming to begin a quilt that small. And so what I thought I'd do was I would look in there and start putting blocks together in particular colours. And as I finished a project, if there was some of this fabric left over, sometimes I've got little strips like this that don't make it into my collection of longer strips. They're all the same width, just over 1¼ inches. And so they go in here. But I thought instead of saving them like this, I would make smaller blocks. So if you saw me make the prairie quilt earlier on, you'll see that I decided to put those little squares. It's a little 4-patch with some white, and then just added some edging of white, and I would make a block like this. I trim all the blocks to 3-inch squares, so you can imagine making a quilt with just 3-inch squares full of tiny little bits does take a while. So I had that one going with the blue and white, and then I had another one. This one is still in progress. I saved some of the solid blues and lots of the bright colours, and I'm putting those in a sort of Irish chain. You can see that blue running through there. I have done some other work to that. I'll show that soon. I also have another project on the go, multiple projects. Again, this is new to me, but making these small 3-inch blocks. I have a collection of these 3-inch blocks, and they're a sort of, I've got pink ones and bluey aqua ones in that container with a little yellow square, and then I've got some squares within squares. Now the green ones, I'd saved all the green fabric and I just started to put together things like 9 patches, or just greens. And then I thought a whole quilt of that would look okay. It would look quite flat though, and so I decided I would add some white blocks, and so I made some little star flowers and with a yellow centre, and I added those into that collection. So I decided one day I had a good collection of those different green blocks, and I thought I would make a quilt with them. So the story this week is how I decided to put that quilt together. So I'd made up my mind that I was going to make a quilt with all this green fabric, and so I took out my longer strips of green fabrics. I took out my 4 3/4 inch process squares of green fabric, the 3-inch squares of green fabric, the blocks that I'd already completed, and then I lay those all out on the table and had a look at them. So I thought I would make some larger blocks, and I came across this rose block, and I thought that would look nice against lots of green to have some roses. So I had quite a few 4 3/4 inch squares that I'd already processed, and I took out the paler ones, and I had no idea for the design of the quilt, but I thought that if I made blocks of 4 of the same colourway, that I would be able to obtain some sort of symmetry or balance when I put all the blocks together. So my initial idea was just to make blocks of 4, and so I made the first 4 blocks of this rose. And I liked the way that they came together, and so I thought I will make some more of those. And so I made 4 more and I put those on the design board together. I really like the look of those, and I like the shape of that block. So I thought I would make some snowball shapes, but this time I would use different colours, and I wanted to have a different centre. So in the centre of these roses there is a half square triangle, and so I wanted the centre in the next blocks to look completely different. At this point I hadn't been cutting any new fabric, and I liked the way those colours worked together. And then I added those to the design wall, and now I decided I needed something a little bit bigger, and so I decided I would put 2 oranges together and I would make little pinwheels for the centre. Trim those down to 3 inches, and I had the idea of making some more snowball shapes, but I wanted to enlarge those, and I wanted to put little points on the outside and larger points. So I made some smaller points. Again, these come to 3-inch square, and I made this block so it's got a sort of snowball in the centre, and then it radiates out into stars or points or flower petals, and I was happy with that, so I thought I'd make 4 of those. And I like the way that the different sizes were working together, and I liked the different shapes. So I liked the connection of the snowball shapes, but also with that addition of spikes. And again, I hadn't yet used any of my little 9 patches, so I needed to start working on those, but at the moment this was the design. And now I wanted to start filling in the spaces between these blocks, arranging them in such a way that I could use all of the smaller 3-inch squares that I'd made. So I thought that these would act as spaces around the blocks. So I was just placing them on the design board just to have a look at different ways that these flowers would work together. And then I decided that I didn't like that larger block in the centre part of the quilt. I'm thinking that this could be the border of the quilt, so I'm working from the outside in. I haven't got a design at this point, I'm just placing things on the design board, and I thought what I would prefer is to have that larger block as the corners of the quilt rather in the central part. So I popped it in the corner with some spacers, and of course now that leaves me with a gap for another block. And for this block I decided I would put a square within a square in that block, and then I've put around the outside some 9 patches with white and yellow, and then there are green 9 patches in the corner. But if you have a look at the cornerstones of that block, you'll see that one of the corners is white. The corner that is touching the centre is a white block, and I thought putting that in that combination gave it a sort of circular feel. So again, I made 4 of those blocks. I liked the way they looked, and again working in balance. So I put the block in the centre of the outside border, and I could either grow that block or leave it small, the same size as the rose blocks. But I felt rather than add spacers, I would add some star points to that and really make it sparkle. And with those white star points, I've added some of the smaller green blocks that I'd made, and I put the square corner, a rose, bigger block, and then another rose, alternating, and I thought that would make an attractive border. And stepping back, looking at that border, I think that works well. So I need spacers now between all of those blocks. And at this point, I decided I also needed to have a plan, because my design board isn't big enough to hold everything on there while I'm working on new blocks. And so I got out my graph paper and I worked out some sort of design plan. I've put those borders around, and you can see there's a sort of centre. And again, I wanted to use a different centre in that block. I only needed one this time, so I thought I'd make a little yellow and orange 9 patch. I've used all of those colours in different parts of the quilt, so that would tie things together. So I made a little 9 patch and trimmed that to 3 inches. And as this block was going to be in the centre of the quilt, I thought I'd use some more of that lovely golden orangey colour. So I've put that in the centre, another snowball that brings all the design shapes together, and I paired that with a deep green because that really helps that orange to pop. And I thought I'd add some sparkling white triangles around the outside, and all the greens and the whites and the oranges that I've used elsewhere would work with that. Looking at it now, it looks a little bit like a button to me, but I'm pretty sure it's called Goose in the Pond. And if you recall, I already had made up 4 snowballs, so I placed those around, and so I thought I need 4 more just to fill in those corner spaces. And I didn't have the exact fabric that I'd used in those earlier blocks, but I have got some small pieces, less than a couple of fat quarters, with a white background and this green and red floral. So I made those snowballs blocks with this fabric. So suddenly, from going with I wonder how this quilt will end up, it's turned into a sort of medallion quilt. It's just got a block in the centre and borders on the outside. I had no idea when I was making this quilt, putting the blocks together, how it would turn out, but I really like the way medallion quilts work, and I wanted now to have a little bit of space. I could have made some more blocks to go around this centrepiece and then touch out to those border blocks. There is space to put some smaller blocks together, but if you have a look, I decided that I would just use a checkerboard just to fill in that space between. I think it gives it a little bit of a place for the eyes to rest, but also it enables me to use up lots of those 3-inch green squares that I've got, and so that's what I was planning to do now. And I lay out my 3-inch green squares in light and darker colours so that they would work together nicely when I put those together for the checkerboard. And I thought that I would make the checkerboard 4 patches, and so it's 5.5 inches square. And so I thought that is a deep enough checkerboard. If you wanted to grow this quilt, you could add more blocks around there. Of course, you'd have to add some more spacers or another block on the outside border, but that's what fit with my design, and I was happy with the way that looked. And now I turn my attention to the spacers that I need in the outside border. I like the way that worked in the inside border with those squares within squares, and so I made some more to go on the outside. And as you can see, there are 2 green, a square within a square, and then another 2 green. So those blocks on the outside are all 5 blocks square. And I needed to build up those rose blocks with some 3-inch squares, so I put those together. And if you look in the central column of this quilt, you'll see that I've joined that together. And the way that I decided that I would construct this quilt would be to make 5 long columns and then piece them together. And I wanted to avoid the same blocks touching each other. So you can look at the centre here, there's 2 dark blocks that would have touched. So it's quite easy at this point to flip things around and just to make sure that the same blocks aren't touching. So I took that column that I was working on the left and I moved it over to the right, so those 2 dark squares on the bottom didn't touch. But it is a scrappy quilt, and so if that was to happen, it's not the end of the world. When you're looking at this image at the moment, you can see that there's a lot of dark. They are different darks. When you're closer up, they have got different colours or different patterns within them, and so it works really well. And now I'm concentrating on that middle column, so I've placed the top block and the bottom block against that, and I'm looking for spaces now to work around for the left and the right hand column for those rose blocks that are on the top. So I just sewed three 3-inch squares together for the top and the bottom of the block, and then I had the spacer and I built up those rose blocks so they would be 5 blocks by 5 blocks. And then when I finished the columns of those blocks, I sewed those 3 together. So that's the central part of the quilt. Now I just needed to do the left hand side and the right hand side, and I built it up in the same way. I put the big blocks on the board and then I looked for where I needed to put my spacers. And if you have a look at the image here, you can see that the central part of the quilt is finished, and I'm working on the left hand blocks, the left hand side of the quilt, working out the spacers, working out the colours, just to make sure that the same blocks aren't touching if I can. And so I put that column together, and then when I finished that, I flipped the quilt over and kept that over on the right hand side out of the way so that I could work again on the left. So that's where we are with the story of this quilt at the moment, the Green Wonder. Another wonder. I wonder when I'll get it finished. I don't know. It depends on the delivery. So I have put stay stitching all the way around the outside. At the moment it's 63 inches square. I'm thinking I might add a border, just a bit of probably the same fabric as the backing to bring it through. I'm not sure yet. I have to see what the backing looks like in person when it arrives. If it arrives, no. When it arrives, we'll be positive. And so that's all I have for you this week. Now again, I'm not sure when I'll be able to post another quilt, because working on these small blocks do take a long time. I've heard people say you have to keep on working at them if you're doing multiple projects, you know, pushing them along. Well, they don't want to be pushed, some of these. Some of these just like to dawdle and they're dawdling. So I will post when I have a completed one, or near completed. If it's a flimsy, I'll post then. And I've started working on the Christmas quilt. Now the Christmas village quilt is improv. I have no design and there aren't sizes. I can't really give you a graph with the sizes on. Oh, all of the details for this I will put on my post. So if you want, sorry, that green one, if you're interested in that design, I will put that on my post, and you'll be able to have a look at that if you want to do that. But the Christmas village, I'm just making it up as I go along. I'll show you a sneak preview. I haven't put it together yet because I don't know what it's going to stand by or anything, but I'll show you the church. I've made the church. I haven't put the backing in. I've just laid backing behind it like a snowy sky, because I might put buildings behind it. Yeah, I don't know. That's the trouble, isn't it, with improv? You walk in one day and you have an idea, and then you walk in another day and you scrap that idea and something else takes its place. And I hope that you are all busy in your sewing room, busy at this time of year in autumn here in the UK. I had a bumper harvest of pears, making jams and chutney and cakes and all sorts of things. Going to make some more of those today. So very, very busy, and I will get back to you when I can. So thank you very much for your company. Thank you very much if you're still with me. If you're not, I'm talking to myself, which isn't a new thing. I talk to the blocks. Do you talk to your blocks? Anyway, before we descend into utter madness, I'll see you again soon. Take good care of yourselves. Bye.